Oh, hello everyone. This is Jim Largan. You're actually in my studio. Let me see if I can get this a little better. Okay, and I'm going to do something today that I would normally do in class. In the classroom, I'd bring in some prints and we would look at them and you can see some of the possibilities. And today I'm talking a little bit about, I'll be exclusively talking about relief prints. And so if you remember, we were talking about relief and intaglio processes in printmaking. The relief process has to do with the uppermost surface of the block or the plate. So let me grab one here. So for instance, this image here is a little linoleum block. You can see it was the linoleum with the backing on it, the cloth fiber backing, and I've carved away parts of the block. You're carving away the non-image area. What you leave behind is what's going to accept the ink and print. So in this case, it's the relief surface. It's the top flat surface, and you're carving away, right, to get below that surface, because what's below the surface won't accept any ink. You just want to roll the ink on the uppermost surface. So relief prints, and there's different types of relief prints, engravings, wood blocks, linoleum blocks. Anytime and even an etching, you can roll in relief if you're rolling the ink on the uppermost surface. Intaglio is the opposite. So you would be inking the cutaway areas, so engravings and etchings and that sort of thing, dry point. But today we're going to talk about relief prints, and this is, I've got a little collection here of prints done by students and myself, and even a couple Japanese prints I want to show you. So in this case, here's a little linoleum block print. Can't really see much of a embossing on the back. The block was inked in relief, and you can see where the cutaway area is the white area. You can see where this artist left a little bit of ink on some of the area that would have been cut away, but it creates a kind of a nice little light gray tone back there. Something else you probably notice when you're looking at this image is the lettering is backwards. And so if you want a word or a letter or a number, to appear legible and correct, then you have to carve it in reverse, right? In this case, the artist didn't carve it in reverse, carved it the way it would look normally, and then printed it, and of course it prints backwards, right? So kind of nice image, though. In a way, it would have been, it's a little weak in here in terms of the inking, but like I said, it does give it some atmosphere and a little bit of tone. Here's another one, kind of the opposite, right? So this image, what we're seeing is a light line on a dark field, right? And so the artist's pretty bold carving, used probably a wide gouge and carved that out. Very graphic and bold, and because of the way the image is cropped up in our space, up in the viewer's space. Kind of interesting. So we have a light line on a dark field. This one, here's another one. I've always enjoyed this print. It's got a little dirty here. Also, like to let you know, I probably traded students for these prints, so generally try to do a print along with the students, and then we swap them. I don't know how we can manage that this semester, but it's a shame. By the way, I really miss being in the classroom, and I miss seeing you, and I miss in particular seeing the images develop. And so this is don't be afraid to consult me along the way as you're working. But let's get back to this image here. We've got a couple of neat things happening. We have light lines in here on a dark field, right? We've got a little light lines on a dark field. And in here, where much of the white has been carved away, we're starting to see black lines on a white field. So you can play with that balance. This artist, inside this window, I guess it's a window, creates that a little bit. We have dark lines in a light field, light lines on a dark field, and then that pattern will work for you. So you're going to be conscious of that. what you're doing with that. So it's kind of a neat image, a little house floating away. I'm not sure. This one here relies on removing a lot of the linoleum, right? Carving away a considerable amount and just leaving areas that collect black ink when the brayer roller goes over the block, right? So a lot was carved away. In order to get a black line like this, you have to carve away almost all of the linoleum or wood, depending on what kind of block you're working with, and just leaving behind what's going to accept the ink and be black. Another phenomena you might want to consider while you're doing this is you want to be conscious of the pattern that your tool is making as you're carving. And so, and I'll mention that again and again as we look at these prints. So the tool, depending how deep you carve down or how shallow, you have a lot of control over, by the way, the width of that cut, depending on how deep or how shallow you carve it. But in this case, the artist created a change in pattern and even a little bit of a change in tone by opening up the lines and going through here. Creates this pattern here and then comes back with a different direction up in this area. I always often think of someone like Vincent van Gogh. In fact, let me grab a print here, one of mine, and that really uses that. Let's see how this is going to show up on here. Oh, pretty good. This is the first time I've ever done one of these, a video of anything, so bear with me. Okay, so in this image, this was inspired by Vincent van Gogh, and if you're a student at College of the Canyons, up here is where the University Center is now. That used to be just a big round hill with a few trees on it, and I thought it was a perfect subject for a Van Gogh-like woodcut. This was actually carved on wood, Baltic birch, but you can see how important pattern is here as it's moving through this cypress tree, and the pattern in the sky, this dappling that's going across here, and same thing in the field. You start to see patterns, the way lines flow, right? You get some cross contour lines. I was trying some stuff up here, trying to figure out how to, what a cloud would look like. I ended up using as reference old engravings and to see how other artists have solved that problem. And, a lot of cross contour stuff going on there. But I want to show you something else. There's an interesting print that was done by a student that's an abstract idea. It's something quite similar. And if you look at my cypress tree and then you look at this abstract piece, you can see the movement created by the contour line, or the way the line was moving. So see if I can back this camera up a little bit here and get a little longer view of it. I'm not sure if I can get it or not. There we go. Whoop, had it for a second. Lost it. Okay, maybe I'll move it here. Just so you can get the idea. A lot of movement in this piece. So let's set it sideways here. And anyway, it just dawned on me as I was looking at these prints how we both use the same logic to create a little bit of volume and some movement. Sorry, with the direction of the cut. So I'm going to move this over out of the camera here, off camera, and let's get these guys out of here. So here's an interesting image here. I think this was done by Raul, one of our students at College of the Canyons, and it's a bit of a narrative. One semester we were doing prints based on sayings, right? In this case, it was Snowball's Chance in Hell, I think is what he was trying to do, but a lot of movement in this piece. So you can see just by changing the direction of the mark and the width of the mark creates a lot of swirling sort of movement around this, probably what's left of a snowman, right? I assume that's the devil. I don't know what's going on in this area here, but that might be the cavernous quality of hell or something, right? So movement and pattern, right? And this one, wait till you see this one. This is kind of cool. This is by a student from Orange Coast College, and it's I think the title was something like "Get Off of My Lawn," you know, and you could see very conscious about the direction of the mark. And again, we've got that same sort of cypress tree pattern moving through this shaggy outfit this creature's wearing, and the rings around the head. So we got swirling motion. Pretty interesting piece. I really had a lot of fun with this. Now this one was printed on a Japanese paper, really thin paper, and that's what we'll be using, you know, well, I don't know if that's what you'll be using, but I'm going to try using it myself when we're doing this block printing by hand. And what's nice about it is you can actually, as you're rubbing, you know, you've inked the block, you put the paper over the block, and then you rub the back of the block. But honestly, it could have easily been done as a linoleum block. The advantage of using an engraving block is it's harder, it'll hold detail, finer detail, and so on. But this is one of my first efforts at an engraving after many years. I think the first engraving I ever did was in a class like the one you're in. It was an intro printmaking class, and we tried out different things. And you know, the little engraving I did, that was many years ago. And then about probably 12 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I got excited about engraving by an artist by the name of Rosemary Covey, and she was an artist in residence at Grand Central Art Center, where my studio is located. And watching her work, and I thought, you know, I just got mesmerized by what she was doing. And then so she turned me on to engraving again. So this was my first attempt coming back to it, and I really enjoy doing it. But again, think about it, same kind of things, right? Pattern and movement in the pattern. You know, Van Gogh would use brushstrokes, right? In fact, if you ever see one of his wood blocks, it's the same kind of thing, the little chisel marks that follow a pattern and really direct your eye around within the piece. So that's that one there. This is kind of funny. I really like this one because it does something interesting. It does, we have a sort of a positive negative transposition, right? So we're seeing a light line on a dark field up here with the dog, right? And then you get down to this character here, which I think might be a bat, you know, opening its wings. For the longest time I thought it was a cat, but then you start to see these, right? You see this edge of this wing, I think. Probably a bat, right? And so it's, you know, light on dark. And then we have, you know, I don't know if you call that dark on light, but it's about, what, equal amounts of light and dark there. But using a matrix of marks, right, creating a sense of tonal change within the piece, and we get an idea of the texture of the dog. So this artist has done some really kind of cool things with the mark, you know, the chisel marks. Looks like he used one chisel almost throughout the whole thing, and but created a matrix of marks to give it some volume by controlling the lightness and darkness, right, of the piece, which kind of brings us up to this thing. Now, one of the projects I'm asking you to do would be do a chiaroscuro or light dark type of a print. And when I did I think we did the lecture on the history of block printing in class, and there was that section on chiaroscuro block printing, which then inspired me to do this piece. This was sort of a graphic depiction of Mark Twain, which, by the way, caught the attention of a publisher who then asked me to do a series of book covers for their company based on this style of work. But you see there are two blocks. There was a block that carries this gray, right, and then a block that carries the black, right? So same thing I've been talking about, you know, we've got a pattern of lines, and if you notice that as the lines open up, right, the lines are, the carved out areas are wider, it gets a little lighter, and as the lines get thinner, you can create, you know, a gradient, I guess, what you just call it. And then up here, you can see some tonal changes, and the tonal changes are pretty subtle. This deeper shadow on his cheek here, and then it lightens up in here. It's just because you can either use more lines, right? It looks like there's twice as many lines in this area than this area, or you can make the lines lighter or appear lighter by making them wider. So, you know, less area that's going to catch the ink, right? And some movement. Kind of happy with this piece. It's pretty hard not to get a decent Mark Twain, you know. He's a pretty iconic figure, right? So a little more on that idea. So this print, by the way, this is the action that's going on outside my window right now with the birds, and I'd love to show you, but I've taped the camera in a semi stable position over my drawing table here, so I can't show you what's outside. Maybe I'll do that some other time. But you can see in this one, just by controlling the width of the cut, you can indicate different values. So if you kind of see these branches and trees that are back in space a little bit, it was accomplished by just either, like I said before, more lines or wider lines. Carving away more of the surface will make something lighter. Leaving it solid, you know, obviously nothing was carved in this area, but with that linear pattern, you can control tone, make some tonal changes. And then throughout the bird is, you know, about that movement of the mark, you know, the movement of the carved mark, sort of an engraver's trick, right? So something, you know, so think of it. It's a black and white image, but there's quite a bit of potential in that, right? So I'm going to move over onto this next one. This is kind of a fun one to look at. This one is, this was a reduction block. So it's a two-color print, but it was done with one block. And that's something I think might be on our list of things to do, right, this semester. So in this case, the artist started off with a block that he carved, very clean carving too, by the way, or clean inking. I can see, and I don't know if you can see it in the light here, maybe you can see a little bit of the embossing of you can see the cut marks, you know, the linoleum texture imprinting itself on the paper in here in the non-image areas. Let's see if I can get decent light on that. I don't know if see if I can turn this one off. Yeah, there you go. So maybe it's, I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but you can see some of that embossing. So anyway, so he carved this whole shape, right? Carved away all the white. Then inked the block up in this cadmium yellow and printed, started making prints. In this case, he has 18 of them. This is number 6 of 18. So if you look at that fraction there, and his signature's over here, and I can't read it, which is a bummer, because I'd love to be able to tell you who did this. But anyway, so then he printed at least 18, but I would imagine he printed 25 yellow ones, maybe even 30, because you go through a few of them trying to, you know, re-register the print in a different color. So then, anyway, so he printed all the yellows and then carved more of the block off. So before he printed the yellow, all he did is cut out the white areas, right? And then inked it, printed it yellow. There's yellow underneath this black. As you can see, it's leaking out in some areas. But then anything he wanted to stay yellow, he carved that out of the block, right? Same block, carved out the areas that he wanted to stay yellow, and then he inked the block in black and printed it on top of the yellow prints. So he had, you know, probably 20 some yellow prints and started putting the black block on top. So one block, 2 colors, and by the way, I actually know artists that did a reduction print with about 50 different colors. And he told me eventually that in the end, though, he'd carved away so much of the block that when he got to the darker color, by the way, you do those from light to dark. If you know, just kind of keep that in mind. So you start with your lightest color first. In this case, it was yellow and yellow orange, and then carved away some of the yellow orange, and then printed black on top. So anyway, but this other guy, he had carved away so much of the block with all those colors that he actually had to carve a brand new block just to carry the black. So anyway, 50 colors, that's a long ways to go. In fact, I don't even know, how they managed to put 50 layers of color onto a piece of paper. I like to try to keep it to a minimum. Now this print here, I don't know, you can probably see the whole thing if I turn it sideways. There we go, that's better. Anyway, in this case, the artist created stamps. So her blocks look like they were what, 4 inches by 4 inches, right? And then she carved out these flowers, different flowers, flower shapes, and you can see that there are multiple blocks printed on each one of these. So she had these strips of paper that she would, put 3 different blocks on and print those, and then come back and printed another block on top of those. So in this case, it's like this blue-green over magenta, right? And where they go across, it gets fairly dark, right? In this case, it's magenta over blue, and then here we have yellow over, it's like a dark lavender, almost a brown over here. And then, because she had all these blocks, so she had 6 different blocks, right? So she had the big petals, and then she had all these, the center part of a flower, right? The stamen and so on, right? In the middle of, so then she could change the order, and she could change the colors, and so she did an entire suite of these things. They turned out really quite beautiful, pretty exciting, and to watch her working. And no two are alike. Right? So then I want to show you this one. This is a student's work as well. Now this was a reductive block. So this is one where his name is Tim. That I can read, see, which is nice. Tim ended up being my assistant at Orange Coast College, and he did a series of playing cards, which were pretty interesting in this process, in this method. So a lot of delicate line work in here. And I'm going to show you some Japanese prints in a minute, and you'll see that the carving of the block's exquisite. It's just amazing how delicate and fine some of the lines are. And you can see Tim has been fooling around with that a little bit in here. So he's got all these little faces and back in here, and that black line is all that remains of the block, right? He's carved everything away except those fine lines that, outline the ribs and stuff. So quite an amazing accomplishment, I don't think I would attempt it, but for the right person, right? Okay, I will show you this. Is just kind of fun. This is really a lot of fun, actually. Elizabeth Britell. See, another one. See, legible. I know who did it. Anyways, Elizabeth is a very creative young lady, and she was a student of mine at Orange Coast College. And this, the block, was inked back here. So she's got a rainbow roll, or what you call a split fountain, where the roller had red on one side and yellow on the other, and she inked the block this way, and then came back and spun the roller around and printed it this way, or rolled it onto the block this way. Okay, so she's got the block inked in this gradient of color from yellow to red to yellow, right? And then on top of that, she put stencils down, and similar to what we did in the stencil pieces, but the stencils were made of corrugated cardboard. So she cut some windows out of the cardboard and inked the corrugations, set those down on top of the block, and then printed that. So I'm not sure it's a linoleum block. It's certainly used the linoleum block. And anyway, got a really pretty interesting piece. I guess it might be more collagraph than relief print. However, she inked everything in here in relief. So that would be the corrugations. You see the higher parts of the corrugation accepted the ink, right? You know, when she ran it through. It's got a pretty interesting embossing on this one. I think we can see it. There you go. That's pretty clear what's going on there. So, so that's a little bit of a not quite a linoleum block or wood block, but it certainly is a relief cut. So I'm going to show you some Japanese prints. Now I acquired these. These were gifts, and you can see they're on very, you know, thin paper. But if you just take a look at the quality of the carving on this, and it's just amazing. Now these are ukiyo-e prints. It's a process of inking the blocks. I talked a little bit about it in class in that the history of relief prints. In fact, you can take a look at the PDF that I supplied you and go back and look at some of those things. But you can see down here these different, I can't read that. I'm not sure what it says, but it could be, it could be, let's see if there's any more chop marks on here. No, those are the only ones. And it looks like there was probably a bigger image at one time. That block was probably bigger. There was more action going on over here, but the piece was cut out and sold probably as two different pieces anyway. But I acquired this one as a gift. So you get into here, sometimes this might be the signature of the artist. It could be the person that carved the block, the person that designed the composition and the subject matter, the person who inked the block, and so on. You know, everybody's, and the publisher, right, might have a chop mark for them. But I have to get someone that knows how to read that and let me know what's really happening there. But it's typically you would see different marks for different individuals. Now the block was inked with a water-based ink. It was basically I think brushed onto the block, and I've only seen it done once, right? And so I'm not that familiar, but you see, you can create these washes, and then the paper is damp. It goes down on top of the block, and then in the process of printing, it activates the color, and the color transfers to the paper. And that's a pretty crude description of the process. So you can probably check me out on that one. I could do a little more research myself on that. But I'm always just amazed at the quality of the carving. It's just amazing. Oh, this one here is another one. So I'm not sure what the scene is, but here we have a chop mark in the corner. Let's see, can I move that there? That's a little better. Let me move it down in the camera. Yeah, okay. See a little better. Okay, so you can see beautifully inked. Got this wonderful transition here. You can actually see some of the brush strokes coming through in the color there above the mountain. And I don't see how many blocks would be in this one. You know, you have a couple of greens, maybe 3 greens, looks like. A couple of grays. How many grays? There's a blue gray and a warm gray and a black. So a lot of different things going on in this image. Real graphic, very crisp, you know. Oh, kind of a wonderful piece. This one here, though, this one's amazing. I'll leave it sideways for a minute so you can see the craftsmanship here and the delicate carving. So anything that's holding ink, right, is what's left of the block. So all this line work, all this delicate line, that's what's the relief surface. That's the part that's up. The non-image area has been carved away, and you can see this was multiple blocks too. And what's neat, something that happens though when you're inking a block, particularly if you can isolate a color in a block. Now I don't think that's quite possible in this one. However, the hooves, the red and the blue-gray, well, not here. They come next to each other, so that would not work. But oftentimes, if you have areas of your block that are isolated from one another, you can actually put 2 or 3 colors on one block, all right, and print it that way. But you can see in this case, the red and the gray are just too close together to have that happen. But the yellow in the gray. They look like there's enough space around those. Those could have been on the same block. Interesting though, we got, you know, sort of a texture here. I don't know if it was made in the inking process or if it was, you know, just a rough block or how that was done. But I just wanted to share this with you just so you can see the delicate nature of the line. It's pretty amazing. So those arrows are outlined and stuff. So impressed with that. I've got some big ones I want to show you, just because I'm, you know, there's many of these prints in my studio, and let's see if we can pull some of these out over here. There's a logic to this. Now let's see if I can. What can I show you here? Okay, I have to turn this a little bit so you can see the entire image. No, you can't quite. I'll have to. Let's see if I can move the camera up a little bit. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can get that image in the camera, but this is one of the pieces I had carved, and Narcissus, and so this was the first block, the key block. This is the one that carries all the detail. Even in the Japanese print, the black that's going over the color, right, when that black goes out around the color, you get, you know, almost like a comic book style, right? The black line is trapping areas of color in this case, right? So that's the key block. That's the one that controls all the detail. And in this case, all the things I was talking about before, and I was using an engraving style to create volume, right? Cross contour lines to indicate volume and form, and of course pattern of marks. And it's kind of fun. It's like, say, well, what kind of a mark are you going to make to create, you know, a frog skin or a rock, or what makes the frog different than the rock, and so on. Grass is easy, right? These reeds are pretty easy to do, but cross contour line up on the form, but in the reflection, the lines are all parallel, and either wider lines or narrower lines to create that sense of tone, right? So this was the key block, and then I came back with a little bit of Prismacolor and drew on top of the print just to indicate where I wanted color to show up on a successive print. So I don't know if I showed you these blocks in class or not, but I think I broke them out. And what I did is I transferred the black image from this paper onto a fresh block, right? So in your studio, when you're working, if you want to do a multi-block, multicolor print, I would recommend you start with the key image, do all the work you're going to do in all the detail work that you're going to do on the darkest image you have, and then while the ink is still wet on the paper, you can transfer that image to a blank block. So a fresh block was put over this. In this case, I ran it through a printing press and transferred some of the wet ink onto the new block. And now the new block, you know, you take it off and it will be a mirror, not a mirror image, but an exact image of the original block, right? So then, because you have the image on there, you know which areas you want to leave, carry the red or the orange or the blue and so on. Let me see if I have a color version of this, and you'll see what I mean. It's a little hard to describe without but here's how it turned out. So maybe I can show you both of them here. Yeah, that's better. That'll work. Okay, so this was the key block. In a lot of ways, I like it. It's been printed on a gray sheet of paper. Here it is, inked up and printed in color. All right, so here we are. We've got the two prints. You can see the black and white key block, and this is one with the color laid in it. And later on in the term, when we get to this issue, I will video record a demonstration of how to actually do that. So don't worry about too much now, but it is a pretty easy process to do and to get multiple blocks and colors to print. So I've got one more print I'd like to show you. Also, carved in wood and then printed in color. So this one, and some of you may have actually seen the blocks for this one, and I carved this at, I think, College of the Canyons. It had something to do with the tree outside. And so anyways, I started, and then it became part of a series of images I'm doing on old myths and fables and things like that. So this happened to be something about Orpheus. And if you'd like to see the full image, you can just go to my website, jamesloriganfineart.com, and you see some better reproductions. Here it is in color. So I printed this with a red block and a yellow block. Originally there was also a blue block, and it was just way too saturated with color in ink, and the paper just